Okay, thanks again for joining us. Four Corners is hosting these workshops and many others as part of our Youth Mental Health Project. This work is a result of the state maternal and child health assessment that found there needed to be an intentional mental health focus on our youth from ages 10 to 19 years old and preventing their death by suicide. Locally, we are working with many partners to have a more comprehensive approach to addressing youth mental health needs. We're grateful for the Title V MCH block grant funds that enable us to provide this education to you today. We're grateful to Dr. Don Bilau for his consultative support in this project and for all of the experience he brings in equipping us for better supporting our youth mental health needs. Join me in welcoming Dr. Bilau. He serves as a school psychologist and has extensive experience in working with children and adolescents. We are so pleased he can share this content with you today. Thank you, Dr. Bilau.
Thank you, Angel, for the introduction and a review as to the need for a workshop such as this. Hopefully we'll have a few others drop in, but we appreciate those that are here this evening, and particularly when we think about the work that adults do in a variety of different capacities and working with our youth who have various challenges, such as experiencing attention deficit disorder. So we're going to take a look at a variety of skills that we can, as adults in various capacities, provide instruction and reinforcement of. I think you'll find that many of our youth that we work with have a variety of skills, but because of the nature of the attention deficit disorder of hyperactivity, reinforcement becomes a key. Reinforcement and encouragement. So we'll take a look at what we can do as adults regarding the various skills that perhaps we can provide instruction in. And certainly within the adolescent world, skill instruction, skill reinforcement is a continuing basis. Kids will have a variety of developmental differences being who they are. And so certainly we could probably do 2 or 3 days worth of instruction in terms of a variety of different skills. But I think tonight what we wanted to do was identify some common skills that we can reinforce. So we'll move forward with this. And since we're a small group so far this evening, feel free to put into the chat box any questions or comments so that we can focus on those and respond to those at the end of the presentation. We do have a lot of content that we will go through. So certainly, since we're a small group, we'll have a great opportunity to process any comments or questions you may have. So take pencil and paper, jot down a couple of things, put some things in the chat box, and we will move forward. Again, thank you to Chris, Bonke, Sarah Kettlewick, as well as Angel Dale as our host tonight in terms of providing the structure and support in this effort. Also, we want to draw your awareness to save the date, where on November 2nd, Thursday, from 9 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon, there will be an all-day gathering, if you will, of a variety of individuals with expertise who can talk about building a healthier community, addressing mental health stigma in general. So not only are we speaking towards youth, but we're also speaking towards adults in terms of experiencing mental health stigma. Stigma is a real issue within our community, no matter what the size of the community or what the neighborhood is. And so we'll be able to talk in great detail with a variety of experts, if you will, about how to build and reinforce a positive mental health community and promote hope, because that's what we really need to do, is promote hope within the community, within families, youth and individuals so they can face challenges with confidence that there is hope and that they can move forward. So we look forward to seeing you guys at this specific workshop, and we hope that you can attend. Once again, just a little reinforcement about what we are hoping to do with our interaction tonight. It was mentioned by Angel that I've had some experience in working with children and youth as a skilled psychologist, but also as a mental health therapist. Certainly, as the years have progressed and the impact of COVID, we have had a variety of challenges within our young population. And certainly their mental health sensitivity is something to be aware of as we as adults move forward in terms of supporting the youth that we're having contact with, whether it's through a youth group or it's through a school setting or a 4-H group, whatever it is. We hope to have an increased awareness this evening regarding the skills that we can use to help promote positive mental health with the youth that we work with. Some of the objectives that we're going to be working with this evening include the following. As you can see on the screen, we're going to be talking about strategies that can be used to promote self-esteem and communication skills of ADHD child or youth. We're going to talk about some problem-solving approaches towards the end of this session that are certainly evidence-informed, and I can assure you I've used those techniques myself and have confidence they are techniques that are useful with ADHD children and teens, if you will. We're also going to talk about the importance of self-care for parents and guardians and adults in general who work with children and youth who do experience attention deficit disorders. It's not an easy task for any of us as adults to work with the children and youth who experience this type of condition. And certainly for they themselves, it's not easy because their world is constantly spinning and turning and their thought processes are constantly spinning and moving quickly. In fact, just today, I was involved in the evaluation of a 6th grade student who experiences attention deficit disorder and is on medication. And he shared with me that his mind is like a merry-go-round. He says it's constantly turning and spinning. Sometimes it spins fast, sometimes it spins slowly. But he says it's hard for me to focus on any thought at one time. And it doesn't matter whether I'm in a classroom setting or if I'm at home. I thought, my goodness, this is a person who certainly is able to offer insight into his condition. And I think you'll find, as I have through the years, that if we give that youth an opportunity to communicate their personal experiences regarding attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity, we can learn from them. And we can also provide them the opportunity to be connected with someone who is interested in listening to that experience that they have. So certainly, I think as we move forward tonight, we're going to be talking about some fundamental issues connected with the youth that experience attention deficit disorder, and hopefully raise a greater awareness as to what those youth are going through. We're also going to talk a little bit about youth who might engage in at-risk behaviors. As Angel mentioned early on, we certainly are concerned about the mental health and which can lead to a sensitivity, if you will, to moving towards behaviors such as suicidality or self-injurious behavior. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well.
Dawn, if I can interrupt, I don't think your slides are advancing. We're still seeing the title screen.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you. I wouldn't have known that. So, okay. So, well, thank you. We'll try it again. I'll try to share that. One thing about technology, it can be challenging at times. Okay, can you see it advancing now?
Nope, I still see just the title screen.
Okay. My apologies for this. So give me a moment and we'll see what I can do with this. Let's pause recording for just a minute. The whole world is out of sync with you, and you struggle to try to figure it out. So we'll go ahead and keep moving on. And Angel, you want to turn on the recorder, please?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. So, as we were talking just a moment ago, the three major types of attention deficit disorder includes the following. Uh, Impulsive, hyperactive type, that seems to be often something we see within the boys in particular. The inattentive and distractible type, we see it within boys, but maybe more so in girls. And because it tends to be not necessarily what catches adult attention is this particular feature of attention deficit disorder. And when we think about, what causes this issue within kids, we're really not sure. But what we do know, based what we collectively, I mean, those of us who work with kids in a variety of capacities, we do recognize this as a brain-based disorder. And so that would mean that it's an experience that is non-intentional, that children, as they move through the developmental ages, will experience this hyperactivity disorder in different ways. So as they mature, as the brain matures, the symptoms can shift and change. And certainly with medication, some of the symptoms can become somewhat muted, if you will, or minimized. That allows the child or the teenager to be more connected with their world. So what we know is really about inconsistent attention that these kids experience. And again, those categories we mentioned before is inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. And we have a lot of times these symptoms are combined. They'll show more. Kids will show more than one set of symptoms, and so they have a different set of challenges. Here you can see on in this slide some of those features of inattention and impulsivity. And as you look at this slide, you'd be thinking about the kids that we work with, core organizational skills stand out. We'll be talking later this evening about some skills that we can reinforce with these children and youth that hopefully can minimize the natural organizational challenges that they have. We're also going to be talking a little bit about skills that youth can learn how to manage and relating to birding, birding out, interrupting others, whether it be peers or adults. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And so we'll address some of that as we move forward. And certainly some of these youngsters will take frequent, repetitive risk without thinking at all about the action. In fact, these kids learn really early in life from a variety of adults that saying or that mantra says, think before you act. Weren't you thinking? So kids will hear that over and over and over and over. It's like a record in their minds. And it's unintentional. Sometimes this behavior becomes unintentional, but there are consequences within our society and educational systems for unintended behaviors that can put others at risk. And oftentimes we see ADHD kids engage in this type of behavior that is driven by their desire for meaning and pleasure. Because essentially, that's what that brain is hardwired to do, is seeking, heat-seeking missiles, if you will, looking for reinforcement of some type. So they'll engage in taking risk, and they'll engage in creating situations that can be unfortunate or risky to those around them. as a psychologist, I have worked with a number of youth in the last several years who've been engaged in threatening behaviors. Now, they weren't necessarily intentional, but they came about as being creating fear and havoc within those around them, perhaps in a school setting or in a community setting. And so upon evaluation, we learned that often threatening behaviors are a reflection of that inability to manage that impulsivity. But there are consequences, and those youth then are it's a learning opportunity to try to work at trying to manage that impulsivity. Hyperactivity. So those are youngsters that seem to be constantly moving in their seats. They forget things a lot. They have trouble staying on task. They have trouble completing task completion as they move forward. And so certainly we as adults it's our responsibility to kind of look at those pattern behaviors, take a step back, and think about it from a perspective of a brain-based experience that this child is going through, as teenagers going through. Emotional control is something a suspect oftentimes within our youth that experiences this condition. Certainly, what we know, and I think we as adults recognize, is that these kids have significantly more difficulty managing frustration. They're impatient. They become excitable. They become very agitated very quickly and very easily. So certainly emotional management becomes a challenge. It's a skill, if you will, because oftentimes these youth do not have a filter to kind of process information and react. They just simply react. So when these youngsters experience this flooding, this emotional flooding, it's one of those experiences where they just find it difficult, maybe improbable to redirect themselves. So the skills that one needs to learn over time are skills that we as adults, no matter what capacity, can spotlight and reinforce and encourage in terms of managing. And we'll talk about problem solving solutions, if you will, strategies, if you will, that is useful to process with a youth experiencing ADHD. So we'll talk about those in a bit as well. So certainly as we work with kids, it's important we recognize, as I mentioned early on, that they are at risk. They're at risk at harmful behaviors to themselves, harmful behaviors to others to some extent, but to themselves is what we call NSI, non-suicidal self-injurious behavior or suicidal behaviors. So the data is pretty clear. And so within this group of kids, so if you as a parent or you're working with the youth in a setting where there are a number of youth who have this sort of condition that's noticeable, what's critical is to be aware of some of these general warning signs that these kids could be at risk to engage in this type of behavior. And if you sense there's an overwhelming acuteness about that child or that youth, it's critical that we as adults reach out to hospital rooms, emergency rooms, law enforcement, call 911, get some help. If you sense it's acute, which is high risk, act upon your sense. Don't just say, oh, it's just the way he is. It's important that we respond because it's our job as adults to do whatever we can to ensure safety with our youngsters. What we do know is that in 2022 in Nebraska, when we think about children who are in care, foster care, or some type of group home care, it's public knowledge that there were 3 youth who ended their lives by suicide. I do not know if those youth experience ADHD, but I can assure you that youth and children experience ADHD could be at greater risk. So we need to be sensitive to that possibility of them experiencing that risk. So changes, how do we know? When we see changes within that young person, where they may become more sad, more depressed, irritable, anxious, changes in sleep patterns or eating habits, then we need to be engaged in an inquiry with that youth to to assess that level of change, or to refer that person quickly to have someone who is safe, who can communicate in a clear way, caring way, so that youth and that child can feel comfortable in sharing their thoughts and feelings. They may find it difficult to find words to attach to their emotions. And ADHD kids are clearly kids who have difficulty oftentimes attaching the words to describe their emotions with their thoughts. In fact, one of the keys that we need to think about working with these kids is that an old theory, if you will, that's is accurate today, a formula, if you will, to kind of help us understand how kids, and particularly these kids experience issues, is the idea of what we call the FTA model. Feelings plus thoughts equals actions. It's a simple formula. So if we are trying to get connected with a youth, that FTA model, inquiry into feelings, inquiry into your thoughts, inquiry into your possible actions. Have you thought about, have you taken steps? So certainly changes is something that falls within that FTA model, if you will, in terms of actions or behaviors that's worth inquiry. And verbalizations, if we hear someone talk about, I wish I was dead, I just want to disappear, maybe I should shoot myself. And I hear that a lot as a psychologist within our older elementary kids, that they will fling at those phrases out when they're frustrated, angry, or irritated. And as I assess those kids, it's not necessary to have, are they a high level risk, but they are experiencing significant anxiety, and they're oftentimes experiencing attention deficit disorder, which means that there's some skills deficits we need to work on and turn language around, so that when they're asking for help, saying things like, I wish I was dead, I wish I could just shoot myself, for the elementary age kids, early middle school kid, it helps us to connect with them. But at the same time, we need to take everything serious in terms of words. So again, when we look at this slide, what stands out to me when we think about kids in general, particularly these kids, the idea of being a burden rings true with many kids. And when we're inquiring with a youth who's emotional, or we have some suspicions or something that's not quite right, particularly these kids who experience ADHD, they oftentimes feel like they're a burden. Now let's think about that for a minute. The ADHD kid is a kid since early age has had a constant message saying to them, you gotta think before you act. Well, it doesn't take rocket science for a child or an adolescent to start realizing, I must be a burden, because I keep getting this constant barrage from parents, teachers. Often they'll say that. Aides might say that. A variety of adults may say that out of frustration, if you will, but unintentionally, we as adults might reinforce this self-image that I'm a burden. So when we hear some child or youth who's talking about being a burden, that's a warning sign. And that talks about, to me, this elevated risk that we certainly cannot or should not ignore them. So I've kind of laid the platform here. We're talking about the differences, what drives these kids so they look a little bit different from other kids developmentally. And so we're going to talk a little bit now about the skills that we could work with as adults to enhance or reinforce, in some occasions teach these skills. So skills to be built, and we're just going to talk about a few of those skills this evening, include things like self-compassion. Oh, you might say, wait a minute, self-compassion? I didn't realize that that could be a skill. Self-care, we hear about self-care, don't we, as adults? We hear, and you'll hear it from me later on as well. Self-care is important for us to become refreshed. Our minds, our spirits need to be refreshed so we can be attentive to the world around us so that we're able to move forward on our journey of parenting, of our journey of caring, of our journey of being a health and human services caseworker. Yeah, I don't know if anybody in the audience tries to help in human services a caseworker or not. That's a tough job. That's an incredibly because it there's one thing we can guarantee many of us who are in the profession of caring for kids and caring for kids who have conditions such as ADHD, that you can't please everybody. And so we get a whole lot of negativism that oftentimes and challenges is directed to us as adults, which moves into this idea of self-care for adults. It stands to reason that self-care for our kids with special conditions such as ADHD is important. And what is self-care without self-compassion? A self-compassion is not easy. Remember, we talked about being a burden, the perception of being a burden. And we'll talk a little bit in a couple of minutes about confabulation. And confabulation is an experience where oftentimes children who experience ADHD and other conditions will engage in confabulation, meaning they don't necessarily lie intentionally or misrepresent intentionally. They take bits and pieces of different experiences in a particular situation and kind of weave it together so in a way that they minimize their own appearance, minimize their own responsibility, if you will, because they don't want to be a burden, because they don't want to be targeted by the adults around them. So we as adults can teach and reinforce self-compassion. And part of that is recognizing the need for us as adults, caretakers, to provide grace, to provide an opportunity for children and youth to beginning owning their experience so that they're able to learn from that experience. So this slide talks about practicing self-compassion with ADHD is not easy because it's difficult as that child and that teen moves forward to cope with all the brain-based changes that that condition may cause. And parents have trouble integrating and recognizing parenting practices with kids with this particular condition. And the idea of self-compassion begins with adults who are able to offer grace and support without being judgmental or forceful that reinforces that sense I'm a burden. It's not an easy task to raise a child who's experiencing or teen who's experiencing ADHD. So self-compassion is that skill that can be taught and reinforced. And essentially tells us okay to err and to be human. And it's actually okay to experience what we experience without rumination and or extensive self-blame. That's a thought process. It's a value that translates into a skill of being able to be able to take a step back and learn from that experience without ruminating about how bad or how awful things are. That's one thing about ADHD kids. They have learned through the years, oftentimes, to look at their experiences being awful and they awfulize that experience, if you will. To such an extent, from a therapist point of view, I look for whether or not children with ADHD awfulize their environment. Because essentially what that does, that supports their behavior by convincing themselves it's an awful situation and I just can't move ahead. So we want to dispute that and be able to promote the idea that you are capable of learning and moving forward. This is not self-pity, by the way. It has nothing to do with feeling sorry for oneself. It has everything to do with being kind to yourself as a student, as a youth, so that they can develop a lessons learned approach. And certainly what we can do is to encourage that child or that youth to value everything daily that they do, no matter how small. How often is it that when these kids come home and the caretakers ask them, "How was your day?" and the kids say, "Fine, okay." And many times adults will say, "I'm glad it was okay. I just don't have time to process this with these kids right now." What's critical and a great learning experience is for us as adults is to promote encouragement and talk about the small things that happen. Take 5 minutes or less to talk about what happened in the day that was really meaningful and helpful to that youth. What was exciting, so that you're building a bridge. So that's one skill, self-compassion. Another skill is called mindfulness practice. And mindfulness practice is a set of skills, and we're just going to talk about one variation of that this evening, where uh, youth can learn how to manage their emotions. Now, remember we talked about earlier how our young people have difficulty managing emotions, so we need to offer skill sets that'll help them calm themselves, help them breathe, get some control without exploding and throwing things and becoming violent and aggressive. But go upstream and teach these skills and practice them, so that becomes part of that repertoire that those kids have. When they feel that body change, when they feel the anxiety coming up, that they learn how to step back and they can start using this a skill, such as mindfulness. And there's a whole lot of different mindfulness skills that youth and children can utilize. And certainly, there are many websites that offer guidance to parents and educators and others, and even adults in situations such as law enforcement and firefighting, what works in terms of mindfulness skills for them. So we're going to take a look at this idea of mindfulness and recognize that with youth experiencing this issue, that your minds need extra care. Remember what I said about that merry-go-round experience? They have rapid thoughts and time blindness. Time blindness. That means the passage of time has little meaning. Deadlines. So what? What does that mean? Task completion. So what? That's not meaningful. So time blindness is equated with often that experience that they have of not being able to focus, not able to complete tasks. So bystanders like adults and siblings, boy, that can create a irritability and tenseness for us, because it's no fun to watch the things not being done on a timely manner. So part of the process here, next slide back here we go, is think about self-reflection, because that's a key to mindfulness. And we want to ask, we're interacting with our kids on whatever level, we should ask them, are you telling yourself the truth? Well, you notice, are you telling yourself the truth? Is your recall accurate? Are you blaming others in your story? Are you making a new story out of this? That's confabulation. Did you make a story to minimize your accountability and responsibility? What would your world look like if you let go of this thought? I often ask that for teens that I work with who experience ADHD. You let that thought go, that awfulizing thought, the fact that you sense that you're a burden. If you just let that go and replace it with something else, how would that make you feel? Are you hurting or helping? Regardless of age, particularly with ADHD kids, that's a critical question to teach self-reflection. Third graders can learn this. Fourth graders, every age can learn this skill of self-reflection. It's on us as adults to teach it, reinforce it in a non-judgmental way, and affirm when you see that self-reflection being demonstrated. So it moves us back to mindfulness. Mindfulness meditation is at its simplest as paying attention to what's happening in the present moment. So that's a great opportunity to teach skills. It may be what one's feeling, hearing, or anything that's noticeable at that moment. Guess what? It only takes about 3 minutes. When I work with youth who are experiencing adjustment issues of some sort, within the community or within the school setting or whatever, this is a skill that I teach, and it only takes 3 to 5 minutes. And I reinforce that whenever I have that opportunity on the onset of working with the youth. Oftentimes I get pulled in to work with youth in crises. That's just the nature of being a school psychologist and a therapist. But when I can, when I'm working with kids not in crisis, I'm teaching this skill. Being noticing of your environment. So what does that mean? Well, part of teaching the skill is we begin with, I try to get kids to find a level of being comfortable. And as I get them kind of relaxed and taking a couple of deep breaths to kind of get comfortable and relax in whatever setting that they're at, I ask them, think about someone that you really respect and you love, you look up to, and who loves you in return. Get that mental image in your mind. Then I ask them, how are you feeling about this particular experience? And then look at that bottom bullet. Make a kind wish and send it their way. What would make them happy? Oh, you're starting to see the pattern here. We're helping to teach this skill that if you are feeling upset, that here is a skill that I can start thinking about. Next, we want to bring to mind someone else you love and care about and send them a wish as well. And we also want you to think about someone who's frustrated you lately. Sometimes a teacher, sometimes as a coach, sometimes as a parent, sometimes as whatever, whoever it is. Yes. And send this person a kind wish, something nice for them in life. So this little practice, mindfulness, is an opportunity for that child, that youth, to get connected with their surroundings, calm that merry-go-round that's they're experiencing in their minds, that oftentimes their emotions are spinning just as well as their thoughts, so that they're able to start slowing down a bit. Mindfulness practice is a key skill, and it's a skill that any one of us can teach and reinforce. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit now about another set of skills, and this has to do with social media. Did I really just post that? Now, it turns out, in my opinion, using social media is a skill set. It is a skill set. Did I really just post it? Our kids with ADHD, often social media is a vehicle, and where impulsive thinking can lead to impulsive actions, impulsive work. And as time has evolved in the last several years, the time lag from thought to post has shortened. It becomes almost instantaneous. There's minimal filters. For ADHD kids, acting or thinking is the norm. Mindlessness and social media can end very badly. Very badly. And you'll see in just a few moments a real situation that just happened a few weeks ago that I was involved with, which reinforces the idea that these kids can certainly create damage to themselves. Now, Facebook and Twitter are obsolete as a telegraph to teens today because Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok grew. Now, it's all about privacy. For us adults and parents, privacy means keeping one's online business and identity to ourselves. We don't want anybody to know. For kids, it means putting whatever out there that they want, that's available to their friends and followers and away from us, adults, prying eyes, parents. So we're going to look at here, and you may be very knowledgeable of this experience already in terms of social media. But social media and kids with adult ADHD are not often a very good mix. It's something that requires some filtering, some monitoring. Snapchat's shtick is about privacy, stealth, and impermanence. Well, that's what we're all taught, right? Photos, videos, and messages sent through this app disappear after 10 seconds or so. You only view once. What's the harm, right? As adults, we think, what's the harm? By the app, by its design, one moment of judgment is supposed to exist for only one moment. Oh, that's reinforcing, reassuring, right? That's why Snapchat's often known as among parents and adults as this nude sending app. We all heard about it, we all read about it. Teens may describe it only as a communication tool, but at least 80% of high school kids across the country exchange on a regular basis pictures of themselves. Boy, that's kind of frightening for parents, grandparents, adults in general, that kids are sharing some type of pictures that they may well regret via snaps. But guess what? Remember I said they're supposed to disappear? Screenshots. Oh my gosh. Screenshots can be made of Snapchat. So there we go. It hasn't disappeared. It's there to be rebroadcast. So what we see, not only Snapchat these issue, but we see this within Instagram. Look at that third bullet here. Teen privacy is a point of Instagram, or short for fake Instagram. If you've never heard of it, ask your kids, ask a teen, and they'll tell you what it is. Now, here's the deal. A lot of adults have never heard this, never heard about this. It's there. It's like an underworld kind of a experience that teens, and particularly ADHD kids, are familiar with. One thing I can guarantee you about ADHD kids like social media. They like games, video games, immediate response, pleasure. So they're become somewhat hooked on this experience. So if we look at this very closely, we notice that this finsta exists because kids, particularly girls, have learned the lesson of a digital footprint, meaning we're not going to use Instagram itself. They'll set up Instagram, another account. In fact, many of our kids that we work with have 2 and 3 and maybe more Instagram accounts. Their public Instagram, what the kids call Rinsta, real Instagram, might have several hundred followers, and they got good things. But then you've got that second, what we just talked about before, where oftentimes pictures are sent between kids. So, and that's kept only open to their closest friends. Their duty is to share similar content, but never with any outside out their group or adults. So certainly the kids who use this type of social media, they recognize that this is a safe place for them to share, and all kinds of things can be shared. Harmful, testimonials, violent threats, because the presumption is by keeping it closed and keeping it away from adults, their closed communication is ongoing. So our kids with ADHD, we have to be monitoring. We need to be aware of that possibility and inquire in a non-judgmental manner, because what we want to do is to challenge their thinking with kindness and dialogue, not judgment and preaching. So certainly the young kids, the middle school kids, need greater oversight. But when kids get older, oftentimes the tighter the restrictions are, the more sneaky the kids become. So it's a challenge for our adults to connect with kids, but the challenge is there for promoting positive mental health, realizing this can be a deterrent to kids' mental health by engaging in impulsive posting that can be harmful to themselves and others. So as we go forward with working with kids in this skill, we want to challenge kids about possibilities of putting themselves in unwise. We could do a little role play with the kids to talk through situations and talk about consequences, because it's important for our kids with ADHD to learn to act with empathy and what we call excellence behavior, positive behavior. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? That yoga principle is a great guide to teach our kids, particularly our ADHD kids, in terms of the use of social media. Several years ago, many schools went to trying to teach media literacy, about the values of the proper use of social media. Educationally, that has fallen out of favor. I think it's because it's like an elephant in the room. Everybody just knows it's there, but we don't know what to do about it because it's become gigantic. But we, working with kids, ADHD kids, we have the responsibility to inquire. Here's just a recent response to a social media issue just within the last week or two. And this is an excerpt from an email that was circulated among staff. And essentially, it's a positive email. It's letting staff know there's some issues going on. But if you look here, a TikTok account was created yesterday that features pictures of some of our students of not so nice comments posted on the pictures. One student reported there are 6 different students that have been posted or commented about. The account has been reported to law enforcement and reported to TikTok. The students who reported were encouraged to keep the situation under control by simply telling others it's not true and it's fake news. If some peer would bring it up. So I thought that was pretty interesting to see this communication to staff. And I think it's useful for staff to be aware that those middle school and senior high kids, social media is something that's there. So we have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to kind of skip over this next section, other than talk to you a little bit about the idea that there are skills to encourage the ADHD kid to improve homework completion, and certainly our kids will engage in losing them. They will forget them. They will mismanage. If you've ever been to a middle school or senior high with a kid that's an ADHD experience, and you open up the locker, well, good luck. Step back, you might get crushed because a lot of stuff in those lockers. Or if you look in the book bags of these kids, they're crammed full of different miscellaneous stuff, no organization. Remember, ADHD kids have trouble with organization. So one of the challenges we as adults can do is work on promoting the skills to become organized. Now, I'm not going to go in great detail on this, but essentially what you see in this slide and next several slides are tried and proven strategies to help our students become better organized. And there's a lot of different ways to promote that organization, but it's oftentimes a point where there are adults and youth in battle in terms of getting the homework completed, bringing it home. It becomes an issue. So assisting our kids in becoming better organized and reinforce them when they are organized is critical. So we'll just kind of roll through this just a little bit in terms of some techniques. I think if you get the opportunity to review this PowerPoint presentation and look at these points, and if you're working with youth, I would certainly utilize some of these techniques in terms of assisting the youth that you're working with. I want to talk a little bit about procrastination. and then I want to talk a little bit about problem-solving behaviors as we kind of move forward. These kids have a great tendency to procrastinate. In case you didn't know, they put things off. Remember what I said about time sensitive, time blindness? That is one of the issues that feeds into these students and these kids engaging in procrastination. So there's some steps that we can adults do to promote healthy skills. Talk about to-do lists, take baby steps, teach kids to get their hardest work done first. But one of the things I want to talk to you a little bit about is that oftentimes these kids experience intense anxiety and panic because the date approaches to get the work done, and they just haven't done it, haven't made the effort because something else is more pleasurable, more fun for them, more meaningful. So we as adults, it gives us an opportunity then to redirect kids and provide them a plan, a strategy. And most of our kids recognize when they're about ready to fall into this pattern of, or this habit, if you will, because it is a habit in terms of moving away from task completion. So we can develop a plan with them. Our skill set that we can work with, as we call it what it is, procrastination, whether they're middle school or high school age kids. And we talk about, let's get a plan going. What works for you to stay focused? And one of the keys is chunk times. Is that work with the kid, the kids have the parents, whoever, or caretakers, and if you're doing homework at home, chunk the time. Remember the time sensitive issue, time blindness. Don't just take 40 minutes and say, go do your homework. 40 minutes will pass and the homework will be done. Not intentionally are the kids avoiding it. Their brains aren't processing that information. They're moving away from the task assigned, the task at hand. So smaller chunks of time allows for greater opportunities. So in other words, give kids breaks. Yeah, work on the math for 10 minutes, take a 2-minute break and go do something, and then come back. And at the end of the day, develop a strategy based on that individual kid where you're rewarding their attention to tasks, you're rewarding their ability to complete a task as they move forward. So education, as well as parents, this homework issue with ADHD kids is a critical issue, and it's an issue that can be addressed with positive skills and reinforcement. So I want to talk a little bit about why do kids interrupt? ADHD kids interrupt conversations with peers of little adults. Well, oftentimes it's because of this. Working memory. Verbal working memory. Many ADHD kids, I'd say probably 70 to 80%, regardless of gender, have working memory which is below average. That means when they're involved in a conversation, they may struggle to recall what they just heard 2 or 3 minutes ago. So that causes them to experience stress, anxiety, and also engage in blurting behavior, if you will, which unfortunately can create some social issues of peers in particular. So what we want to do as adults is to teach the skills to be able to self-monitor themselves and also be able to help them acknowledge that there are certain skills they can use to decrease that. Now, sometimes our kids are just bored, and that interrupted urge is really the anxiety. So what do we do about it? What can we do as adults? Well, one of the keys is to look at is practice. Again, practice. Adult caretakers, as parents, support staff, could be even probation officers, HHS staff, could in 5 minutes practice a conversation where you can have the youth begin improving their working memory skills that will also decrease that urge to blurt. that urge to engage. So one key that I found through the years is have a short conversation, allow that youth to jot down a couple of words that'll help them recall what we talked about, and then have them repeat the major points. It might be only 1 or 2 minutes of conversation. That's all you need to start so you can have it. Then it gives you an opportunity to reinforce that skill of being able to use their working memory and find cues and clues themselves to help them attend. We want to also encourage our youth to develop the confidence, and you do that through practice with them using phrases such as, I have something to share. I don't want to interrupt you. I'm just afraid I'll forget it. Now, our senior high kids, our older middle school kids, identifying phrases such as this that you're comfortable with, that's helpful. And practicing it for 1 or 2 minutes and hearing you reaffirm that. Because part of these skills that we're trying to promote here is our social skills that we take for granted with virtually everyone else. With ADHD kids, these are skills that need to be reinforced. They may have them, they just need to be reinforced and enhanced through practice. Watch out for overwhelming. So we can teach our kids to be aware of watching the cues that others may give them, that you're becoming frustrated or bored with whatever the conversation is. So we can teach them through practice again. And listening, praising kids for listening, and using that wait now method. And working with a lot of youth through the years, teaching the wait now method is a very helpful technique that certainly allows that student to begin to ask themselves, why am I talking now? So, do I need to say something now? So again, practice. So I see we're running a bit over time. My apologies, but I think the next couple minutes are useful for you. For kids with ADHD, teaching and practicing behavior problem-solving strategies such as SOTAs. It's a problem-solving, evidence-informed, long evidence that says teaching kids how to use this acronym to help them identify what the situation is, think about the options, think about the disadvantages, advantages, and then process with them a better solution to an incident, or talk about using this application in anticipation of a particular experience or interview that they may be about to approach. Kids with ADHD kids benefit from this structure. They benefit from the simple acronym, SOTAs. And it's a communication device that allows us as adults to connect. Did you use your SOTA before you did this? Let's use a SOTA now to assess how things could have been done different, lessons learned. Here's a written format. Let's come back here. Here's a written format that I've used through years. Same idea, just concept. And if I want to go in more detail, I talk in more detail with the ADHD kid about what that experience was in that particular situation. What this does, by the way, this particular format, it reduces confabulation. It allows more truth to be identified. More opportunities for that kid to learn from that experience. Lessons learned again. So at the end of the day, we start thinking about self-care. Talk about self-care for kids because that promotes self-compassion. How can you have self-compassion so you do that? For kids, for us, we get tired, exhausted working with kids whose minds are running, their thoughts are running, their emotions are running. So as adults, it's important we be sensitive to ourselves, mindful of ourselves when that sense of irritability increases, we're tired, we saw signs that, boy, we just need to become refreshed. So any action that allows us to become refreshed and involved in pro-social healthy behaviors will help the kids we work with, because we need to be connected with ourselves, take care of ourselves, as well as being able to take care of those that are in our charge. Here's something I've shared for years. Take a look at this. I personally like to get flowers for somebody I care for. I I like to blow dry my feet. Sorry guys, but just don't stand in a shower and do that. In other words, it's soothing to have that nice warm air. It's a funny little thing, but it's a nice little thing. So I'm sure you all have your own list, but it's important that you take a few minutes every day for self-care to refresh yourselves. So at the end of the day, it's important that we all know where resources are at. And these are great resources within the Four Corners area that are useful to you. 988 is a nationwide resource for mental health services, and not only a suicide helpline, if you will, but it's also available to help problem solve someone with a behavioral or mental health crisis. Certainly, you have the Blue Valley Behavioral Health, as well as Centerpoint out of Lincoln, that are useful to help as well. Those are important numbers that you need to know and need to remember. So as we kind of move forward to the end of this time, I appreciate your sticking with this conversation. I'm going to look at chat in just a minute, but here is the great people who put on this workshop this evening, and others that are coming up, including if I can see it here. No, including that one we've talked about in November. So, Angel, I'm going to take a quick look at, if we can, look at if there's any comments or questions in the chat box. And we can also, since there's just a few of us, if any of you would have any questions you might want to offer or comments, it would be fine right now. I can certainly entertain it. Otherwise, shoot me an email and I can visit with you via email. We're in this boat together, helping kids, helping families, and I appreciate your attending us tonight. So is there anything anybody would like to say before we sign off? Well, if not, then I look forward to emails. Angel, we'll shut it down in just a couple minutes and we can discontinue the recording, if you will, Angel.
Sure. And then I have a quick closing statement.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Angel.